What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Monday, everybody. Okay, so it's been a rough day today. A lot of personal stuff that I had to deal with. Fortunately, everything is okay, but I had to deal with some things. And now that it's okay, I realized that Ross Coulthart's reality check Q&A that usually drops on Sundays did not drop last Sunday. It dropped today, Monday. And one of the topics that they discussed is really fun. So I'm just going to remind you that out of this potential Majestic 12, or now they're talking about Majestic 27 group, it's like just 27 people that know the full picture of what's going on with this stuff. There had already been comments from author Walter Kern, who is also a journalist, who has David Grush as one of his sources, and he's been talking to David Grush for a little while. There's a recent video I did on one of his most recent statements about David Grush and about President Trump potentially disclosing UFOs. But there's this quote that is from longer ago where he discloses who David Grush believes is at the top of the UFO secrecy, who's like running the show. And there are many names that have been mentioned before. There's the Bush family, there's Henry Kissinger, and there's Dick Cheney. And Dick Cheney, to those who know his career, know that he probably fits the profile of a potential secret keeper of those types of revelations. So let me show you this from Walter, and then I'm going to show you a story that Ross Coulthart discussed that is really interesting about Dick Cheney. So here it is.
High-level UFO whistleblower last year. And I said to him, who among all the people in society is keeping this secret? Who sits atop the pyramid of classified information about UFOs? And I thought he was going to say something strange, like the Grand Mason of the, Scottish Rite Lodge, or Prince Charles, or the Mossad. But he said, Dick Cheney.
I can tell you is that these are people whom I know are directly involved as legacy program gatekeepers. One of them sat on the National Security Council with Dick Cheney in his White House years. It's very, very interesting to see the people who are now being revealed to me as the people involved in, frankly, this cover-up. And yes, they are going to be named. They are going to be revealed. There is going to be an unveiling of who these people are in my own good time.
And he revealed a little more today with this question that was asked by Megan. Shout out to both Ross and Megan for a great show today.
Paul, let's move on. Who is the boss? This is an email coming in from Jim. Hi, Ross and Megan. I repeat my question of a couple months ago, which you probably were too busy to consider. Apologies, Jim. There is obviously a committee of people from security, military, and politics responsible for the cover and non-disclosure, but someone must chair this committee and have overall responsibility and maybe have more clout and final say. Who do you think this is? And do you think they could be pressured directly, maybe by releasing their name, position to the public domain? Keep up the excellent work, Jim from the UK.
I think it was Dick Cheney. I actually do think Dick Cheney was heavily involved in the legacy program. And I'll tell you a story. I've got a great story about this. One of my program insiders, shall we say, when I asked him this very question, gave me a number. He gave me a personal mobile number, which I still have in my phone. And he said, this is the guy who's the head hog. And he said, it's Dick Cheney. And I kind of laughed and I rang it. And I couldn't believe it. I was so freaked when Dick Cheney answered the phone that I just hung up. I was using hiding caller ID, so he couldn't track who it was. And I was absolutely paranoid that the forces of the dark state would be deployed to track down who this cheeky journalist was that had rung Dick Cheney. But all I can recall is hearing the gravelly, absolutely undoubted voice of Dick Cheney coming on the line. And I remember I completely freaked. I wish I'd had more journalistic courage and asked him a hard question. I didn't, and that's my failure. But yeah, I've been told that Dick Cheney was a principal in the legacy program. As for the other people that are involved in gagging public knowledge of this issue, I certainly think there are people from the Science and Technology Division of the CIA. Oddly enough, I don't think directors of the CIA have necessarily been briefed into this secret, nor directors of the Defense Intelligence Agency. There are key people. I've been told the name of one person in NASA who's still there, and they are not the NASA administrator. What apparently the legacy program does is they pick people who they know are going to be there for a while, but who have absolutely unimpeachable credentials to protect the secrecy and security of the legacy program. And so they're normally, how should we say this, a few rungs down the ladder. I've been given names. I've had people tell me confidently certain names, and one of them was Dick Cheney. I wouldn't feel comfortable outing them at the moment because, frankly, I just don't know. I do think that the idea of an MJ-12, a committee of 12 that was essentially involved in making decisions about disclosure and dealing with the phenomenon, is probably a reality. The more I look at the alleged MJ-12 documents, I've gone from being deeply skeptical to thinking there really was something to it. It's certainly not called MJ-12 any longer. It's operating under different names and codings. I am aware of certain names that have been mentioned over the years, but frankly, I don't know for sure. There is definitely, though, a control group. And one thing that fascinates me is Hal Puthoff made an admission that at one stage under the previous Bush presidency, he and a group of people were invited to take part in a decision-making process that involved senior levels of the White House as to whether or not there should be a disclosure.
What do you know? We have that clip.
I was contacted by a CEO of a think tank in Washington, D.C. This is back a couple of decades ago. He says, I want you to come and participate in a conference here in Washington. I said, well, frankly, I'm too busy. What's it about? He says, I can't tell you what it's about. But if you come and you participate, you will consider it later to be one of the most important conferences you ever been to. Well, since I have respect for him and his background and many things he's done, I did finally decide to come to this conference. And when I arrived, there were about, 15, 20 people. I recognized some of them from the military, from CIA, DIA, some businessmen, and so on. So I thought, well, this is quite an interesting group of people. And so, to start the conference off, he said, this conference is about disclosing something to the American public. As a startup position, let's assume that there have been crash retrievals by Russia, China, and the United States. And the question is, can we bring this out to the public? And so I think I, and most of the people I knew, when you talked to them later, said, oh, this is really cool. I mean, this can really go someplace. So he said, okay, the strategy we're going to use is we're going to make a list of all the areas that you think would be affected by this. And then on each one, you're going to have to grade them on a scale from +9 to -9 as to the level of impact and whether it's positive or negative. Okay. So we started out by making lists. So we started out with the obvious things. Well, I mean, the stock market, maybe religions. Well, certainly politics would be affected. So we made a long list. I mean, it was really a long list. And the time we got down to the bottom of the list, we were really in the weeds. Like, okay, if corporation A has access to retrieve materials that corporation B doesn't, Then when this comes out, Corporation B is going to sue Corporation A, they're going to sue the government. This is really going to be a tough thing to kind of handle. Okay. So anyway, we broke up into groups. He's taking a certain number of the things that were in our list. Okay. And in my group, we added up the numbers, +9 to -9. And we ended up in the negative category, even though we were kind of positively disposed to the idea. So I thought, well, maybe that just has to do with the particular list that we got. So then I talked to other people that were on other lists and said, you know, we came to a negative number also. Well, make a long story short, it turned out that everybody going through these lists, it was a very sophisticated situation with complex computers and big screens and all that kind of stuff. It finally came down to the fact that the problem was there's so many areas to handle, and there was no way to handle them all at the same time. And so the final result was, therefore, the leader said, we're going to recommend that we don't go forward with this. And so those of us who were participating in this were pretty disappointed, thinking, we started thinking that, this would be a good thing to do.
And apparently the decision was made not to disclose. I can't help but get it very annoyed by that, frankly. I think what
Dick Cheney was part of that meeting with Dr. Puthoff. It's at around the time when Cheney was at the peak of his powers. So presumably that makes sense to me.
whatever the bad news is, if there is any, I think we've got a right to know it. And I don't know who the control group are these days, but I hope that they're reassessing and rethinking through what they tell the public. It is certainly getting to the point where, frankly, a decision needs to be made. Otherwise, we are looking at imminent catastrophic disclosure, which would not be healthy for a lot of people in America. If they want to negotiate themselves an amnesty and a position of strength, the best thing for them to do would be to basically out themselves, acknowledge their presence to the president, and get this over with. It's interesting, because you would think that Marco Rubio, as the acting national security advisor, would be read in. And I did say about a week ago when I was talking about this that I assumed that Marco Rubio had been read in. I actually had a phone call from somebody allegedly in the know, and they gave me a spanking for making such a strident assertion. They said, you can't assume that Marco Rubio has been read in. That's how tightly this secret is held. There are people, I'm told, in the National Security Council, that's essentially the National Security Advisory Body for the executive branch, the president, who are briefed in and who are aware, but it's not clear to me that they've made the decision to yet brief Marco Rubio. I tell you, if I was Marco Rubio and while I was Secretary of State, I was given the ability to be briefed as acting national security advisor, it would be the first thing I would do. Similarly with Trump. We do know that Trump's been at least partially briefed into the reality of NHI, and that doesn't make him, though, a member of the control group. It's a really interesting situation. Frankly, there is, I'm pretty sure, a control group. And I don't know why this has been tolerated. Maybe there is some presidential order that was made decades ago. But there's been this ridiculous situation where it has not been by any means a certainty that a president or a national security advisor will necessarily be read in, briefed into the secret. Let's hope that that group shows itself. If anyone's got the list, I'm here, ready and willing.
So, yeah, a bunch of things with that, though. First of all, that anecdote with Dick Cheney was really funny. I don't know how long ago this was, but I don't know how I would have reacted. Probably I would have done the same because his voice is pretty hard to miss. Like, it's that guy. When Ross talks about all of these names that are being revealed, I think we've reached a point where it's pretty evident that the people who don't want this secret out are going to do anything to prevent for the information to go out. And the ones that do seem to be in a pickle right now, because some of them are good people that are just part of this because it was sort of in their destiny to be part of this, and they didn't ask for it, sort of like being born, you know. And they're in a pickle right now. And I agree with Ross. A lot of those people need to come forward and just talk about it and see if you guys can reach an agreement. But it's just too much already. There's a boiling point that we're kind of reaching, and denying the strangeness is just stupid at this point. We're just gonna keep feeding the consumerism machine and the never-ending conflict that has persisted for so long. And it's just like, we have to try and do something different than what we've been doing all this time. Hopefully they listen to whatever Ross is trying to tell them here. But yeah, some names need to be revealed very soon. And I think that is going to start to happen. I think it's time. So let me know what you guys think about Ross's anecdote of Dick Cheney. What do you think about this group that was initially Majestic, allegedly, and then sort of it became Zodiac? I don't know if you guys remember that clip from Engaging the Phenomenon of George Knapp and Colm Kelleher when they spoke about Zodiac, how sketchy Colm Kelleher got. Like, he didn't want to talk about it. You guys remember that one?
You can tell me if they sound familiar. Free Griffith, Mary Elliott, TRW.
I'm not going to comment on that
because I'm not saying anything. I'm not attaching a name to it. I'm just saying, you know.
Well, I know where that is going, so I'm not at liberty to comment on that program.
Okay, but are you even able to say the name, or is it something where you can't even say the name of it?
I'm not at liberty to discuss that program, so I'm not. It's part of what I can't talk about.
George, can you tell me what I'm talking about?
No, not really. No.
You can't say the name?
I don't think I want to go there, not with Colin as part of the program, but we can talk about it off the air.
I'd love to do that if you can stay after a few minutes or even another time. But that's, yeah, because that's of high interest. Does that have anything to do with David Grush coming out and anything that he discovered while he was doing his investigation for the UAP task force?
I think Dave did touch fist bumps with some of that information and some of those people. But you'd have to ask him that. You know, he'd have to be the one to answer that.
At a certain point, it should have been known as Zodiac 2. And I don't know if Immaculate Constellation is part of that. So what do you think about this group? Who do you think it is? Who do you think is at the top right now? What do you think the tech bros role in all of this is? Do you think any of them already know some of these members of this group? Or do you think some of them are part of this group? Let me know in the comment section down below. I think it's an interesting one. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, hype, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That's all you need to do in order to help us, and it is what helps us the most, so thank you. But if you want to support us in other ways, there's a few links down there you can choose from. You can also become a member on YouTube. You can also become a member on Patreon, which I just opened last week, and thank you to everyone who's becoming a member. I think we're past the 30 member count, so thank you to everyone. Or you can support us through KGRA. Anything you choose to do is always appreciated. So thank you. And that's it for me today on this video, but I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious and inquisitive like Ross Coulthart. Always. Bye.